Welcome to Got Grass, conversations with the legends and leaders of Bluegrass. You've enjoyed live Bluegrass at Guitar Town CT concerts in Hamden, Connecticut since 2008. From Tony Rice, Rouse Stanley, and Doyle Lawson to Tim O'Brien, Sierra Hall, and Billy Strings. Now you can go behind the scenes as we chat with your favorite Bluegrass stars. I'm your podcast host, Chris Worth. So I'm happy to welcome my old friend Josh Williams to Got Grass. Haven't seen Josh for quite a number of years up here in Connecticut. So welcome, sir.
Oh, Chris, thank you so much for having me, man. It's great to see you. Great to talk to you.
Those of you out there who are Guitar Town fans know that Josh played here quite a few times over the years. I think you played here with Tony 3 times, and then with Rhonda a few times. And then we had the Tony Rice fundraiser concert that you kind of led. And then we had the Manzanita, our 10-year anniversary concert that you led that band with Doyle Lawson and Justin Moses and those guys, Ricky and Todd. So, it's been a long time. I haven't seen you since then. I think it was like 2018 was the last time you were up here for that show.
Wow. Golly, has it been that long?
Yeah. Well, I know time flies and people's lives move along, and that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
I was talking to David Peterson today on my podcast, and he said, it just is what it is. I said, that's probably true about just about everything in life. It just is what it is. You just have to accept it.
Yeah, it's just you don't realize how fast it's going by until one day you're like, where did it go?
Yeah. But I know that having kids is a real good measure of how time goes by, because your kids grow up so fast that you don't even realize it. All of a sudden they're big, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Yeah, I've got my oldest is about to get his driver's permit. So I've got one driving, and I've got so my son is driving, my daughter is on his heels. She's 12 going on 20. And my youngest, Gus, he'll be 10 in June. So happening fast.
That's amazing. I remember when you first was born.
Yeah,
I was like, wow, okay, this is going to be a life changer, and I guess it was.
Oh man, so different, but at the same time, such a welcome change. I mean. Back probably the first couple of times that I was up your way, I probably wasn't in the greatest health back then, because I was when I was playing with Tony, especially early on, I ended up getting sober while I was playing with Tony. So that was a much needed change there.
Yeah, it's funny because at the time I didn't know anything about that. I just you came to the show, and then I'm looking at pictures recently of you at the show, and I said, Jesus. You were so skinny, and you had the sunglasses on. You were just like into yourself. And I said, I didn't know at the time. What would I know? I was just, I met you, you played, and you went home, and that was the end of it. I had no idea what was going on. But anyway, I wanted to start with a non-musical question, which was kind of like, what's a perfect day off like for you these days when there's no guitar around, no work, probably with your kids, I guess. Would it be
yeah. Hanging with the kids, man. Anything that we do, in all honesty, half of the time, we don't do anything, and we're all cool with that because I'm always on the go, it seems like. And, when we're here together, the 4 of us are here together, we have that, we enjoy the time. We try to, which, the kids, they don't think about it near as much as I do, but the time goes by so quickly. I try to make sure that we all have time together, being either like watching a movie or just watching TV, or sometimes we'll get games out, in the kitchen at the table and play. We've played Clue, we play all kinds of stuff, and just fun stuff, just enjoying time.
Yeah, family time. Yeah, nothing like it, really. I mean, I think the only regret one might have in life as you get older is you look back and say, I should have spent more time with my family, my kids. And that would be a bad regret to have, I think.
Oh, yeah. I came off of the road for the most part for them. When I played with Rhonda for another 8 years when I went back to work with her, and I I would have stayed if I could have, but just with the way that things were going, and COVID, man, COVID really uh you know took pretty much the entire little nest egg that I had, to pretty much just survive it. And then, once 21 rolled around, everybody was like, "Oh, back to business as usual." When it's like, well, no, it's not for me. So I had to kind of count my losses, and that's why I moved back to Kentucky. I was uh, able to get back into the home with my mom for a little while, and then now that I have the house, and but it's just, I want to say it's a lot cheaper to live in Kentucky than it is in Nashville. It's not a lot cheaper. I don't think there's anywhere in the country anymore that's quote unquote cheap to live,
Yeah.
But I do like being up here closer to my mother and closer to my brother. I have an older brother named Justin. He's 6 years older than me, but it's kind of nice to be able to have that. Not that we were super far apart to begin with. I'm only 2 hours from where I was living in Nashville. So
Mhm.
I'm still constantly making the drive back and forth, from here to Nashville, and I play the Opry every chance I get with Rhonda when she needs me. Uh, so I still get to Nashville as much as I did when I lived there, and but I do like it a lot better. But I came off and took a day job uh because working her schedule was going to be like no opportunity for me to see my kids. All three had started school. They were all school age at that point, and I uh I was only going to get to have weekends with them, and if I was on the road on those weekends, that just wasn't going to work out. And unfortunately, I had to make the decision to leave a good stable job, uh and move to an area where I basically, uh, kind of had to start over. I mean, I still had, I was still working with Rhonda when I moved up here, and then when it came time, uh, about 6 months after I moved up here, I went ahead and left and took the day job. And bless Rhonda's heart, she tried every way she could to try to keep it to where I could still work with her and stuff. And, finally I just, told her it's, we got to be fair to everybody else involved as well, and asking somebody to come into my spot for only half the dates and half the money wasn't exactly a fair thing to do. And making the guys have to hang with two different people, half the time. So it was just one of those things where, I needed to do it. If I could have avoided it, I would have, because I would have stayed working with Rhonda another 10 years. I would have happily done that. But I'm proud that I was able to make that decision. A lot of the musical, a lot of my years, man, has just been all about me making music, and I have to make music, and that's just my calling and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, I'm a dad, and when I became a dad, that became the most important thing in my life. So
Yeah.
that's the decision that I made.
Yeah. Well, I was talking to Dave Peterson today, and I mentioned I was going to be talking to you tonight, and that you had a regular job now, with your kids. And he goes, that's a good man right there. He's doing what he should be doing. He was very impressed that you. I know it's it's a hard thing to do, to give up, especially a job like Rhonda, which is probably one of the best jobs in the history of bluegrass, right? I mean, that's everybody would want. That's a full-time everything. Good job. I'm
Yeah,
sure it was a tough one. Tough one.
it
But
was, but like I say, I knew what I had to do.
Hmm.
you know, and so did she. And there was, uh, it was I had as much support as I could have from all sides on it. And like I say, I still get to play with her quite a bit. So it's in a lot of times it's like I never left. I just don't have to play near as much, and I can spend more time with the kiddos.
Yeah. So when you were growing up, were there bluegrass musicians in your neighborhood or in your part of the state that you knew or hung around with or were exposed to, or is it mostly through records and radio and stuff?
The majority of it for me was through Flat and Scruggs records. When
Mm.
I was about 5 years old, six maybe, and Dad used to play a lot of bluegrass records and stuff. He had Bill Monroe, and he had a lot of Flat and Scruggs, and that was my first real exposure to bluegrass. And I remember getting excited and waiting on him to come home from work, and before supper, we would sit down and listen to these records. And I remember trying to listen to one of the records that we would listen to a lot was the Strictly Instrumental record, which they put out, and they had Doc Watson on there with them, and that was a great record. I remember sitting down and trying to pick out which instrument was playing what, and finally, when I got to where I really wanted to start playing something, there was a guy local here that was a Scruggs style banjo player, and I was able to take banjo lessons from him when I started just I was about 8.5, I guess, just before my ninth birthday when I started, and I took lessons from him for about 3 years, but uh, by that point I already knew that I wanted to play, like just from that time that I spent listening to the records with my dad. I knew I wanted to play. I just didn't know what instrument that I wanted to play. Dad played guitar a little bit, so he could show me a few things. But uh, once I saw the banjo and heard Earl and all that, I really wanted to do that. And I
Yeah.
was very blessed to have somebody that actually did know the Scruggs style here fairly close by. So that was pretty fortunate.
Yeah. So I know you co-host a podcast. It's a great podcast, the Hometown Bluegrass Show with Tim Batts. Is he a little friend of yours, or how did that relationship end up?
It's funny. We're both from here, and we never were around each other that I can remember. I know the first time that we met, he has a funny story about it because we actually met in South Carolina, where his sister lives with her husband, and they were putting on a festival. And apparently, he walked up to me at some point when I just woke up and was stepping off the bus for the first time, and he was all excited because he was from close to where I'm from, and he says I was just a butt to him, but I don't know if I was or not. It's possible, but I kind of doubt it. But uh, he says that when he told me where he's from, I was like, yeah, okay. That was my response to him. But he actually became the vice president of the Bluegrass Association here in Western Kentucky that my dad started years and years ago. And anyway, and I really met him and got to know him through that. And that's where we were already kind of hanging out and getting to know each other. And then one day putting together, we were actually working together to put on this little local festival uh, here near here in Calvert City, Kentucky, that we do. It's the first weekend of October every year. It's the River City Folk Fest that they do, a River Folk Fest. And anyway, he happened to just say something to me. He was like, "Hey, I've got an idea, and I want to talk to you about it." I was like, "Okay." And he said, "Man, I've been thinking a lot about doing podcasts," and he said, "I haven't found a lot of them on bluegrass." And he said, "You've got some cool stories from being on the road, and you know a lot of people and heard a bunch of stories and all that." He said, "How would you feel about doing a podcast?" And I was like, "Dude, I would love to do a podcast. That would be so much fun." You know, and so that's how that got started, man. It was a conversation that we had in his pickup truck, and he didn't even think I would take it seriously, you know. But I did, and was all about doing it, you know.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of your episodes. It's a very good podcast. It's
Well, thank
a lot of them, these they ask the same stupid questions like what kind of picks do you use? The stuff that doesn't interest most people. I
right.
think people like to know about people as people, not just, their musical stuff, because you can find that stuff out online.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah. You know, we
I
just
like,
had most recently we've had Jerry Douglas on there, and I wanted to ask him questions about him and his history, not the same old, you know, what do you listen for in a dobro? Like, what makes you? And I didn't want to know that, you know, because you can find that anywhere, like you said. You know, I wanted to know like what was it like playing, you know, growing up in Warren, Ohio, with like how did you come about wanting to play the dobro, you know, and all that kind of stuff, you know, and stories about when he was with Boone Creek and stuff, you know, when his time with Crow and all that, you know, the Whites. And I found out on that podcast that when he joined the Whites and started playing with them, they showed up at his house in Virginia and loaded with a moving truck and loaded his stuff up and moved him to Nashville. I didn't know that. That's awesome. You know, I mean, where else do you hear stuff like that?
yeah, yeah. Well, I think I started my podcast a little over 2 years ago, so probably about the same time.
Yeah,
And for me, as a promoter, presenter, whatever you want to call me, I was always so busy making everything sound right and making sure the food was there and then cleaning up and the band would leave. I never really had time to talk to bluegrass musicians. I mean, a little bit, but not much. The podcast, I can really talk to people. It's just so, I love it. It's just not just, let you say, not just the technique and the equipment. It's about the person. I think that's what
exactly.
people like to know about. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, when you were first playing guitar, were you into Tony Rice from the beginning? Like, was he your guitar hero from day one? I know you started out on banjo, so it took a
Yeah.
while for you to get to guitar, but was Tony like the guy you heard and said, "Whoa, I got to play like him"?
Well,
Or
so really the first person that I was really into as far as guitar playing was Doc Watson.
no,
And it was because of the Flatt and Scruggs Strictly Instrumental album. And Dad also had acquired some Doc Watson or Doc and Merle or, you know, whatever over the years. And I got to listen to those too and thought that stuff was great. And, but I remember I was playing banjo in a little group here, and there was a friend of mine who's a few years older than me. And he, uh, was really wanting to do like lead guitar playing and stuff. So he had found uh, an intimate lesson with Tony Rice on homespun video. And that was the early one, you know, that had Church Street Blues on it and Gold Rush and all that stuff. And when he got that, I was over at his house and he played it, you know, and was like showing me some of the stuff that he did and I was blown away by that. And I can remember um he would have a guitar out. He had a couple of guitars laying around there and stuff, you know, and I would sit across with one of the other guitars from him. He had the tablature that came along with it. And I couldn't read that style of tab. So I just watched him when he would play and we were both sitting there, you know, learning to play the Tony Rice style of like Gold Rush or Blackberry Blossom, stuff like that. And but I remember this the first time that I watched him, and it was Church Street Blues that changed my whole outlook, you know, because I saw him sitting there, and he was, you know, he had this what looked to be a humongous guitar. You know, of course, I didn't realize that it was just because Tony was a fairly small frame guy, But he had this guitar that in that video just looked so huge, and he was playing it, and it sounded just so clear and so good, and it was like effortless. It just looked effortless. And he's sitting there, and he's got the golf shirt on. He's got like a sports coat on, and he's just singing like it's nothing and playing like it's nothing. And it's just like, that is so good, man. And that's where I was like, I don't know who this guy is, but he is the coolest guy I've ever seen. And I want to do that. And it was a few years when I ended up, doing it. But man, I decided early on that I was going to play as much as I could. I would learn every instrument that I could get my hands on because I knew that I wanted to play music. And I figured if I knew how to play everything in a bluegrass band, then I'd probably have a better chance of getting a gig when I'm older, right? So it was kind of, that was my thing. Like when I was in high school and stuff, I was still playing banjo, but I was playing mandolin in another group and playing guitar with some other people. And I had taken up the fiddle by that point, was playing that quite a bit. My dad's brother, Reg, my uncle Reg, was a fiddle player. So he always made sure I had all these different instruments. So that was like stroke of luck for me. But so I grew up playing banjo, and then come along graduating high school and got the gig with Special Consensus. So I went from banjo to mandolin as my main axe with a fiddle, mandolin, and fiddle. And then when Rhonda called, that's when I decided to go to guitar. And I'd already been kind of thinking, I wanted to kind of do more singing. And I thought, if I was going to be a lead singer in a band, then maybe I should play guitar. Maybe that would be a lot easier. I never expected to get, any recognition as a guitar player, let alone be like coined as an actual guitar player, but that's just how it worked out, man. But I loved all of it, so a lot of people used to ask, what's your favorite instrument to play? And it's like, well, I don't really have one. It's just whatever one I'm picking at the moment.
I remember very well at the Tony Rice benefit concert we did. Chris Eldridge was there, and at one
Hmm.
point, you and Chris were doing two guitar note for note. It might have been Gold Rush.
It
It was
was,
a
yeah.
it was a great look of joy on your face. It's like you would both memorize every thing of the solo. It was like so fun
Yep.
watching you guys do it together. I'll never forget that. I have it
That
on
was,
video somewhere, but I don't know. It's just that was something.
if you ever find that, I would love to have it because we did that a couple of times, and it's just so much fun to get to do that because he's like me, I mean, we grew up listening, and he actually got to be around Tony, because of his dad's relationship with Tony. And, that's something I wish that I could have had. I mean, he's his nickname Critter. I mean, Tony gave him that, I mean, that's awesome. So, but getting to do that kind of thing, he learned those things the same way I did, just by watching and listening, and of course, he had the tablature, and I assume he could probably read the tab. I never could, but I could see everything that Tony was doing, and I could mimic that, you know. And what's funny is the first time that we did that together, we were with Dana Bourgeois and those guys at IBMA over in Raleigh, and we were just trying out guitars. But anyway, we ended up playing that together, and we ended up playing it in unison, and everybody was just like, "What's happening? What's happening right now?" And that was like the first time we ever did it, and we were just both like, "Wow, that's really cool." And it dawned on us both at the same time too that you did the same thing I did growing up. Like this is a connection that we already had a connection as friends, but this was like yet another one that we hadn't even tapped into yet until that moment. So getting to do it at your show was just a chance to be able to take it out and do that in front of the people, you know. That's why it's so much fun to do it.
Yeah, that was great. So yeah, that was you first came here in 2009 with Tony and Wyatt. Ricky was playing fiddle, Rob Ikes was on dobro, and Bryn was on the bass. Um, what are your memories of that band? Because that was really a heck of a band. I mean, looking back, that was a that covered a
That
lot of ground, that band.
yeah, that was probably the closest to ever like really recreating Tony's music from the days of old, you know. We all we all brought our own thing into it, but uh we also, you know, like we would do Ginseng Sullivan, and I would always try to play the same solo that Sam played, you know, even if it ended up getting stretched into from a half solo to a full one. I would still try to come close to playing the one that Sam played on the record. And the same with Rob, you know, he would honor Jerry's solos, you know, and and the fact that we could do that and put it where it needed to be, but at the same time also expand on our own. I think Tony had a lot of respect for that. You know, Tony was always real big about, you know, sound like you, don't sound like anybody else. But I also saw him plenty of times when I would uh, play something in a song that was either something he played on the guitar or it was something like a something that Sam had played on a record or Ricky or whoever, you know, Grisman, whoever was playing on that particular song. He could tell that the research had been done, you know, and I think he liked that on top of the fact that we could also be ourselves,
Mhm.
you know. But
Yeah.
but Bryn, out of all those guys, man, Bryn was probably she was one of the most amazing musicians I've ever been around in my life because she could be across a room with her back turned, and Tony could hit a single note on his guitar, and she could tell you exactly what note it was and what octave it was in, and he would be like, "Hey, watch this," and he'd do it, you know, and he'd be like, "Bryn, what's that?" And she'd tell him, and he'd be like, it even blew his mind, you know. It's just so cool when you see somebody that actually has perfect pitch, you know. And she's good at anything, you know. I mean, she's a great bass player, she's a great piano player, cello player, you name it, she can do it. But you know, she's gone on now to be a oh, what is she? She's some kind of a nuclear engineer or something now, you know.
Yeah, she is. It's funny because I've been trying to get a hold of Bryn because I wanted to get her on the podcast, but she's proved impossible to get a hold of. Even through the college and blah blah blah. I just have not been able to because I had Rob's been on the podcast and you've been on the podcast. Ricky didn't really want to come on it, and Wyatt he doesn't really want to come on it either, I guess. But I'd love to talk to Bryn, but I don't know. Someday I'll find her.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
I haven't talked to Ricky in a while. From what I understand, he's had some health issues of late. So I need to reach out and check on him. And as far as Wyatt goes, you know, Wyatt's always just been kind of the guy to not want to step out in front, you know, and which is why he was always so happy because Tony was his hero too, you know. Tony
Mhm.
was his guitar hero, his own brother, you know. There was never any uh competition there. You know, he looked up to his own brother as much as I did or anybody else that was around. And you know, Wyatt is his own player in his own right, you know. And I would like to see him uh come out more and do more because he deserves
Mhm.
the praise and the honor, you know, the recognition. He deserves it. He always has. You know, I mean, Tony only had one rhythm player, and there's a reason for that. You know, because Wyatt's the best. That's why. You know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we'll see what happens. I respect people's privacy, and I don't badger them to come on if they don't want to come on right away. So,
Yeah. Well, I'll
um,
help you. I'll do what I can to help.
I know we've all heard stories about Tony and read the books about Tony, and I personally had a few really nice conversations with him, either in between shows or before a show, or even by telephone. Um, I wish I had, you know, not knowing he was going to die in 2020. I wish I had. I mean, I know he kind of withdrew into himself in the end, and nobody really could talk to him. I get that, and not that he would have talked to me, but I just, it's like when your dad dies. I mean, you kind of wish you would ask them all these questions or spend more time talking. At the time when they're around, you don't really think of it because they're there. And then when they're not there anymore, you say, geez, I wish I had more time. I always felt that way about my dad and about Tony Rice. It's just like you wish you could go back and
I
talk
agree
again.
totally. I agree
Yeah.
totally. I was,
Yeah.
when my dad passed away in 2017, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, he and my dad's name was Tony as well, and they, for whatever reason, and I used to roll my eyes every time because they thought it was hilarious to walk up to each other and say, "Hey Tony, hey Tony." They thought that was so funny, and it's like, why? What? They had their own little thing going, but it was cool to see. It's like my dad's over there palling around with Tony Rice. My dad's pretty cool too. you know
Yeah.
but when my dad passed away, it was it was a type of thing where he had been ill for quite some time, but we thought it was just another issue that he had had, like he'd had for the last few years, and thought it was just going to be another short stint in the hospital type of thing. And it got real quick. And when he had passed away, I ended up, Tony, I wanted him to hear about it from me and not from someone else, so I just sent him a message, and I was messaging a lot of people or calling a lot of people to let them know. And anyway, it wasn't long after I had sent that text. It was probably about 9 o'clock at night. And I got a text message in all caps from Tony that said, "Josh, are you there?" And I text back, yes, or "I'm here," or whatever I had sent back. And my phone rang. And, I had a picture of Tony that would come up every time, he would call. And that picture came up, and I ended up having a conversation with Tony for about an hour and a half that night. And it was one of the, not the last time, but one of the last long conversations that we had. Um, and he still wasn't in good voice then, but you could tell that he had been trying to work on it and get his voice back. The last conversation that I had with Tony was, it was fairly short, but it was much different. He sounded like Tony Rice for the first time, and that I'd ever heard him sound since I'd known him, but I didn't get to meet him until after he'd already lost his voice. But I can remember, getting that call. And matter of fact, it was Christmas Day of 2020, and I'd gotten a phone call from his niece, and she had basically said, "Hey, I'm not 100% sure on this yet, but I'm trying to get it figured out. But uh, they they're saying that Tony's gone." And I remember pulling over because I was driving. I pulled over and just I lost it, because that was my hero. And a lot of people don't realize that he offered to sponsor me when I was newly sober, and all of that, and that was just huge for me, knowing your hero on such a personal level, and knowing that they have love and respect for you as well. That was really something. And but yeah, I would give anything, to have more time with either one of them, and Crow for that matter too. When the crazy thing is between Tony and JD, they pretty much ruined Christmas for us bluegrassers, And I hate to laugh
Mhm.
about that because I am just kidding around. But you know, uh, Tony dying on Christmas Day of 2020, and then the next year with Christmas Eve for Crow, and that was uh, that was a tough couple of years there, But they were all like family to me,
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, I always tell the story with Crow. My oldest son Weldon, for the first 3 or 4 years of his life, he didn't realize JD Crow wasn't one of his grandparents. He would always just immediately go straight for Crow, and
Mhm.
he'd pick him up and hold him. They'd go do whatever, man. It's just like, okay, well,
Mm.
I'll be here when y'all get back.
Wow.
Having that kind of a personal relationship with guys like that, man. What other genre can you do that in?
No, no, you're right. So, at any point when you were with Tony and friends with Tony, was he the kind of guy that would ever like say come over to the house? I know he famously was a private guy, but like would you go to his house and hang out and I don't know, look at him fix watches or play guitar? Was that not really his thing at all?
That there probably was a time when that was.
Hmm.
Uh, it was not during the time that I was close with him.
Hmm.
So that was never really a thing that I did. Now I know other folks that did. And then once we stopped playing, in 2012, the last couple of shows we did as a unit, we ended up doing without Tony.
Hmm.
And that's that's kind of when he really started pulling away and becoming so reclusive.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that was we did have a talk. I think a lot of that was due to he had so much music up here in his mind that he couldn't get out of his fingers anymore.
Hmm.
And I couldn't, and nobody could really tell him, like, people just want to see you. Like, I would try all the time, man. You don't even, walk out with your guitar, hold it, and walk back off stage. You don't even have to play it. Nobody there cares. And if you do play it, it can sound like crap. Nobody cares. We just want to see you, man. Everybody just wants to see you. But I think uh, he always said that losing his voice wasn't a huge deal to him because he was a player, not a singer. He never considered himself a singer. And but I do think that took a little more toll on him than he let on. And I think that's why he worked on, really trying to get that back since, his hands didn't want to do what he wanted them to do anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember once I was in contact with Tony and Yale University, and I talked to I knew the president of Yale University because he was a big bluegrass fan and a bluegrass bass player, Peter Salabay. And I said, Peter, would you be interested in having Tony Rice come up here and just give a talk? No playing guitar. He said that would be the coolest thing in the world. And I did mention it to Tony at one point. And he thought the same thing, but just never. It was just too much, I think, off of his normal, you know, radar. But like I say, I don't even bring the guitar. Just people just want to hear you talk about your life. That would be plenty.
Just
But
tell stories, man. Just tell stories. Tell fun stories, something that people would get a kick out of because they're not going to hear those things elsewhere. There was a few things that we did where Tony was able to do. It wasn't like a day long thing or anything, but there was a handful of things that we were able to do that did involve kind of a workshop esque type of thing where he would come in and talk about certain things. But one thing that kept him from doing that was because, like, it's so easy for people to turn those into a little show.
Hmm.
And, well, shows cost this much. That's not what this is. I'm not getting paid for that. So let's do this. And it became less about the information and more about what can we get Tony to play? What can we get Tony to play? You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And like I say, there was a handful of times and when I say handful, it was probably like three or four in the entire span of playing music with him that something like that happened. But the drawback was because of the way his voice was at that time, it was difficult on him
Hmm.
uh, talking, that long, and what little bit of growl that he had would lose it eventually. So I know that was rough on him too. It was uncomfortable the way that his voice had gotten, for him. I don't think he enjoyed. I think it gave him a sore throat. I think he just was hurting a lot after talking for a really long time, which is why his
Yeah.
shows didn't have a lot of talking in them.
Right.
You but when he did, he would always try to speak up as much as he could. And uh, but yeah, there was a time when he had first told me about working on his voice and working with a couple of people. Uh, we had been kicking around the idea of doing uh, another record for Rounder, and we were going to do a Tony Rice unit album. And at the last minute, that whole thing just kind of fell through. And I think that was kind of the end of it, when he realized that he wasn't going to be able to make the record that he wanted to be able to make. Uh, I think that was kind of the last thing, because it was not long after that we just, ended up
Stopped.
not playing.
Yeah.
I remember calling him and talking to him, well, trying to talk to him about when Rhonda had called me and offered, that job back. And I tried to call him and couldn't get a hold of him. So I'd sent him a text, and I got a real cool text back from him that said, uh, support you, and no matter what you do, we've made a lot of good music together, and we will make more good music together. So don't worry, you know.
Hmm. Hmm.
And unfortunately, we never did get to make any more music together. But
Yeah.
uh, but what we did, uh, I still love getting to see videos and stuff of it. And people still ask me, oh, I just saw this video of you playing with Tony, or there's a picture of something somewhere of me standing with Tony. And it's like, how cool was that? And I always tell them it's exactly how cool you think it was, times 10.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because there are some videos on YouTube of you guys playing at Unitarian Hall, and I think the last one is in 2011, and I think there's one of the last song you guys played, which was 9 Pound Hammer, Long Jam, and at the end of it, you could just see the pain he was going through playing, and how it was just like, I just can't play this shit anymore. I can't
Yeah.
do it. And at the end, he just kind of just said, phew, like, that's it, I'm done. And you could see it in his face. It's really poignant to see it, like, right up close. He bowed, but you could tell it was like, I just can't do this. I
Yeah.
guess not long after that, he'd stopped because, but you could see it so clearly in his face. It was very emotional to see for me.
Yeah.
I mean, he was my hero too, but you got to know him and play with him, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And standing up there beside him and seeing that was tough too, because like I remember one night, was almost every time that we did 9 Pound Hammer, it just seemed to get longer and longer and longer, and there was one night where he was having a rough night playing, like he wasn't able to get anything out, but it was like he was getting so pissed off at it because it wasn't coming out that he was going to make it come out. And he just kept going and kept going and kept going. in one sense, I wanted to be like, it's okay, like you don't have to do that, But in his mind, he did, he
Yeah.
had to do that. If he wasn't going to be able to play every single note that he wanted to play, then by God, he was going to play the ones that he could play, and he was going to keep playing them. And then there was other nights where he would get up there, and it was just like 1989 Tony Rice, or 85 or something like some nights was just unbelievable. And then,
Yeah.
some were more real than others, but there was one night, and I could be wrong, but I was thinking that this happened up there at your place on one of your shows at the Unitarian place, and we were doing uh Wayfaring Stranger, and he would always play different. He would rarely play the same thing that he had played on records, or rarely play the same thing twice. And there was one night when on the Cold on the Shoulder album, when he recorded that with those guys, that had a very distinct guitar solo where he would do a do 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 do. And I played that on the mandolin one night, and he looked over at me. He didn't do anything. He just looked, and I could see him kind of like nod his head or something. Maybe he smiled. I couldn't tell from where I was standing with his mustache. But the next time that he took it, he played note for note that solo that he played on the record. I don't know if it was, like a F you to me for playing that stuff, or if it was no, you reminded me, and I can still do that too, So I don't know what it was, but it was very cool for me to get to
Wow.
hear that, that solo.
I
So
suspect it was, I don't think it was an FU. I suspect he was like, yeah, that's pretty cool. You remembered that I can, I'm gonna I'm gonna play it.
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah, yeah.
That's yeah.
And I would
Uh,
ask him stuff all the time about how he played this or how he played that, and there was only a handful of times where he would actually show me stuff. But there was those times, when he would show me, how he played. I know one of them that he showed me was the kickoff to The Likes of Me. That was one of them. The other one was when we had first started doing the vocals again. Uh, that uh, that was one of the songs that we did was John Wilkes Booth.
mm,
Remember talking
mhm.
about the solo, but especially the kickoff and the outro and all that kind of stuff. And he literally showed me how to do that, and handed me, the old bone, and I played it, and he was like, no, 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 do your pick like this, and there was way more downstrokes than I thought I'd heard, so it like blew my mind, but I'll never forget that. And another thing that happened at your place, we were working up, what song was it we were working up? We might have just been running over something like Ginseng Sullivan or one of those. We were doing something that had three-part harmony in it, and Ricky was there singing that third part. And Ricky was singing, he was either singing a minor over a major or a major over a minor. And Tony sang the part so that Ricky could hear it. And it was, of course, it was an octave lower, but he actually sang the part. And when he got done doing that, we all just kind of stood quiet for a minute. And me and Ricky were just looking at each other like, just barely holding in our excitement that we just heard Tony Rice sing, for the first time in who knows how long. So that was
Yeah.
pretty awesome. And that did happen at your place, because I remember that was the year that you had us in the very back room. Like when you went from you go up the stairs, and then you've got,
Mhm.
you had one year we were on this side, one year we were on this side, but we were in the very back room. I think it was like a music room or something maybe, but it was a big room, and we were back there because that's where all that happened. And he started singing those parts for us, and I just remember that. I'll never forget that because that was literally, you know, he stood there and sang with us.
Was that the year that I served the lobster rolls? Somebody told me you like lobster rolls, and he did.
Yeah, it could be. It could be.
Yeah. There's a great video on YouTube of when he was playing with Peter Rowan Quartet when they're doing the song White Dove, and Peter and I guess Bryn were singing the parts, and Tony comes around the back and sings the baritone part, and people like went crazy. It's like, he was singing it down low, but it was beautiful. It was just like perfect,
Hmm.
exciting to see. Rare.
Yeah, yeah. Somewhere I've got the photo of that. I don't remember who took the photo, but I do have a copy of that somewhere where, and if I remember correctly, his hair's down. It's not in a ponytail. It's like down in front of him.
I think so. Yeah. Wow. It's so many memories. One of the things that about Tony Rice to me, the most amazing thing, maybe the most amazing thing, was that when he sang a song, and I think Alison Krauss kind of made this comment once, when he sang a song, you felt like it was his song, it was his words, it was his life. It wasn't like he was singing some song that somebody wrote. It just came out like it was him. He believed it was him in those
Yeah.
words. And I have to say, um, you were one of a small group of people who also have that ability. That's my compliment to you. You
Well,
have
thank
that
you.
ability to put a song and come out with the emotion that sounds like it's from you. Uh, and Tony
Well,
was the
thank you.
same way. I love that about. I think because I feel like a lot of bluegrass singers, there's this whole thing, all the sad lyrics, the happy music, and sometimes the emotion of bluegrass doesn't come out. Often, to me, it doesn't. Like country
Right.
music is more emotional to me than bluegrass in terms of the lyric, but some people can make it emotional, and I do appreciate that.
Well, thank you. And I think that's why, there's such a close relationship with country and bluegrass because of that. You can almost do, you know, you can do a lot of bluegrass songs country style and it works perfectly, and vice versa. There's a lot you can't, but um I think there's a video of JD Crowe the New South back from 1975, and Tony, kind of talks about the material sets bluegrass apart from other things. And I think that's what he was able to do was carry the emotions. He was able to make you feel uh what he felt when he sang a song. I have heard Allison say that, it was like he was singing that to her, whenever she heard it for the first time. And it is funny because I had initially uh I've been wanting to do a Tony Rice tribute album for a long time, and I'm hoping to gear up and start doing that pretty soon. But I had talked to Flux at one point about being on it, Jerry Douglas, and Jerry jokingly, whenever I said I wanted to do something that was like Josh Williams plays and sings Tony Rice, and he comes in with like plays and sings everybody else, because that's what he used to always give Tony crap about, was write your own stuff, get some of your own stuff, but he didn't have to, he didn't have to do that. He was able to. He had such a close connection with Gordon Lightfoot that it was unbelievable for them to have not known each other any better than they did. Later in life, they got to know each other pretty well, but he was able to take those songs of Gordon's and literally make them his own. And you know what I always found? Uh, I found it odd that the older that they got, the more they even resembled each other. And the the last few pictures that I saw of Tony before he passed away, and then same of Gordon before he passed away, they looked similar. They were both thin and they had long hair, and there was some pictures where Gordon had the mustache like Tony's and some where he didn't, but it was just so odd to see how similar the two of them were. you know?
I noticed that too. Because I loved the connection that they had musically. I wasn't really sure if they were friends, outside of just Tony making those songs his, but they definitely end up looking like each other. I was struck by it. It was, holy moly, this is weird.
Yeah. Yeah, it really
Yeah.
was. And but yeah, I mean, obviously Gordon was huge fan of Tony's as well, as obviously Tony was of Gordon's. But that was just great material that worked great for bluegrass. And I don't know if Gordon ever thought that this would make a good bluegrass song, because he was so involved in the folk movement at that time.
Yeah.
Uh, but a lot of those songs just worked so well.
Do
Bluegrass
you think
style.
Tony Rice, in his deep down inside, maybe wanted to be like a Gordon Lightfoot, like a singer-songwriter doing his own songs? Or do you think he never, as long as he had songs that he didn't care about writing them?
I don't know. That's a good question. Tony did write some, not a lot, but he did
Hmm.
write some. Most of the things that he wrote were instrumentals.
Hmm.
He considered himself a jazz musician, so he wrote all kinds of jazz tunes. Uh, they did release on the Night Flyer compilation album one of the songs that Tony wrote right after his divorce was final, and it was called "Never Meant to Be."
Oh yeah.
And in the Lightfoot style, it had many verses, and but it was a great song, and maybe he felt like and ultimately that song never made it on the album it was recorded for. And I think it was because Tony was leery to put something. Uh, I think it made him vulnerable having that on there. I never asked him. There was a lot of things that I would have loved to have been able to ask Tony, and I was just scared to do it. Um, I always wanted. I had a million and one things that I wanted to ask him, but I didn't ask everything because part of it I was scared to. Part of it was because I didn't want to upset him. Uh, but the biggest reason that I didn't was because in the 5 years that we worked together and the probably 20 years that we knew each other, um, there was never a time that I wasn't in awe around him. Like I would have to kind of check myself, because if I wasn't
Yeah.
careful, I'd fangirl him, all over the place. And I didn't want to be like that. So I found myself really staying quiet. And a lot of times when I wanted to ask certain things, about people that he played with or maybe his brother, because I never did get to meet Larry. I really wanted to. I was a huge Larry Rice fan too, but I never got to meet him. So uh, there was just a lot of questions that never got answered, and I wish that there was a platform like this 20, 30 years ago that we could have, you know, gotten him on and of course you wouldn't have been able to air it without, an explicit language sticker or something. But just gathering all of that info and all of those stories and stuff, there's so many things that I would have loved to have known about Tony.
Yeah. It's funny because the book that Tim Stafford did with Kellen Wright is fascinating, but you still feel like there's a little bit of a wall there between them and what Tony's going to open up to. I thought, it was great story. It's interesting about all this stuff, but there's just, and maybe that's as close as you're ever going to get to someone like Tony. I don't know. I just feel like there was a little bit of separation there that they couldn't, that he didn't want to bridge.
Yeah.
And I don't blame him. I mean, he doesn't want to open up all of his, you know, because
Right.
everybody, that's his right. But it just would have been fun to get him in a more relaxed state, like on a podcast, and just like, break his balls and see what he did, or
Oh yeah.
whatever,
Yeah.
you know.
I would love to have had him and Sam Bush and Ricky Skaggs and JD Crow and Jerry Douglas and all of those guys, David Grisman, have them all in one room and just, tell stories, and do that for all of them. But, I mean, it would be cool to have them, and now to even hear, because David has been on several things talking about Tony, and he
Mhm.
has so much love for Tony, and he, like me, was very emotional when Tony passed away, and that hit him really hard. And uh, we actually talked quite a bit after all of that had happened, and he even cried on the phone with me at one point. Where he was it was still, the memories were so strong and the emotion was still so raw. But I mean, the two of them, I mean, look what they did for music history. I mean, we have an almost a whole nother genre of music because of them too. Just for having the crazy idea of taking gypsy jazz songs and turning them into bluegrass and writing bluegrass gypsy jazz tunes and taking a whole wealth of material that had never been even considered for bluegrass and doing it that way. I mean, just pure genius. And David credits uh, Tony for as much of it as himself. I mean, he said he had a certain sound, and then Tony came in, and that sound changed, and everything changed. In fact, when I was talking with Jerry last week, he was telling that story, and he said that he and Skaggs got to go uh, uh, to a rehearsal, or maybe it was just him. But anyway, he got to go to rehearsal, and they had just gotten back from Japan, and he said that, man, we had played with Tony for this long, and then he walked in and they started playing this music, and he said it was the coolest thing I've ever heard. He said Tony was playing things I'd never heard him play, and I'd been playing with him for a year and a half, and it was just all so different. And he uh he was just like, man, I'm watching history right now, and he knew it, and he was.
Yeah. Um, It's funny because when I started doing the podcast, I had two kind of goals. One was to talk to everybody who had played with Tony Rice, and another was to talk to everybody that played with Bill Monroe. So I'm working my way through, but I've had David Grisman on, and Todd Phillips, Mark Schatz, and Ronnie Simpkins, and Rob, and Jerry, all these guys. And the thing that they talk about, especially when he was younger, was what a wise ass he was and how funny he was. They were going out doing all this crazy stuff and listening to jazz all night, but they said he was just one funny MF guy.
Yeah.
But she never saw that side of him later. He was, I get, maybe you did a little bit, I don't know, but it seemed like got much more serious as he got older. But
Yeah, I got to see some of that. He would cut up a lot, especially when he was driving, you know.
mm,
But I used that time riding with him somewhere to kind of get him to open up and just talk to me about stuff. I'd ask him about things with Crow, or what the trip to Japan was like, when they went, and his time in California. Uh, I would ask him a lot about uh, Clarence, because I didn't know anything of Clarence until, well, I knew a little bit. I knew the name because my dad had the Kentucky Colonels albums, and uh, but I didn't get into those near as much because I was so enamored with Flat and Scruggs that anything else that sounded this much different, was just different, and I wasn't into it at the time. And I ended up becoming, you know, enamored with it, just like everything else. But I asked him a lot about that. I asked him about the guitar. I asked him about, what Clarence was like, and all that kind of stuff. And most of our time spent together was a lot of serious talks, especially when I was first getting sober, stuff like that. He would tell me a lot of his story, and but uh, he liked to cut up. He liked to laugh. He liked to make people laugh. I never got to know the Tony from the young days because when he was younger, he was the absolute life of the party. And he ended up turning into an almost exact opposite of what he was at one time, because he was the guy that would stand out and talk to the people and jam all night long, and then get a little bit of sleep just to, work again the next day, and always in a suit and tie. In fact, Ricky Simpkins said that somewhere he has a photo of Tony Rice in his front yard, in Ricky's front yard, raking leaves in an Armani suit.
Oh,
Always
man.
dressed to the nines, man.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
it's funny. You said talking to him while he was driving. So when you're driving, you kind of let your guard down because you're focusing on not killing yourself in the car. So maybe some of your natural barriers to like your conversation, you just talk because you can't be, deciding what you just say what you say because you're focusing on keeping the car on the road. So that's probably a brilliant way to talk to him.
yeah.
Drive it around.
It definitely was a captive way of talking to him. It wasn't so much. Wasn't a whole lot of BS. During that point, and there was, I can't remember what it was. I think it might have been about Larry, or maybe about his dad. And I had asked him something, and he just kind of said something about not wanting to really think about it or talk about it or something like that. And I just remember thinking, "Ooh, okay," and that was it. I didn't come forward anymore, ask him anymore. But rarely did that happen, and that's something I appreciate about him, because I think he had uh, enough respect for me that he would maybe open up about certain things that he didn't necessarily want to open up to many people about. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I do know that I'll never take that for granted. I mean, that was time that I appreciate having with him.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you get to know his wife, Pam, at all? To me,
Yeah,
she's kind of a mysterious figure, but I guess she was there all the time, right? She was part of the scene and with him a lot.
she was there a lot. She wasn't there all the time.
Uh-huh.
But uh yeah, I've gotten to know her over the years pretty well. And of course, India used to travel a lot with him, his daughter, and she would uh come to a lot of the shows and stuff, and I got to know her really well, and she's just a beautiful, amazing person. And but Pam's a very sweet lady. I have, no issues whatsoever with her. I think she's an amazing person. She gave me a really cool experience a couple of years ago when we were out there. My group, Southern Legacy, was playing out at Camp Springs, which is just down the road from Reidsville, North Carolina, where Tony lived. And she basically had me come over. I went to India's house the day after the festival was over with, and I basically got to have a whole afternoon with the guitar. and it was like it was a really cool experience because it felt like Tony was in the room, you know, and I hadn't felt that in a while, and it was really nice to know that both of them, that India and Pam, both said the same thing without me asking. They said that they really felt like Tony was his spirit was really strong that day, and I miss
Yeah.
him. I miss him a great deal, but having that time with with the antique was really cool.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of different people talk about playing it and how they play and say, what is the big deal about this guitar? It just doesn't sound that great. And why is it so famous? But I guess it had to be somebody to pull the sound out of it, right?
That guitar, in a lot of cases, I've heard a lot of people play it and it not sound that great, but it was magic in Tony's hands.
Hmm. Yeah.
But Tony, the first time that he got to play it, it belonged to Clarence, and Clarence was able to pull that out. And I think Tony was able to, I mean, he used to pick with Clarence a lot, and Clarence was his hero. So when he finally got that guitar, I think there was a lot of probably a learning curve even for Tony, for a
Mhm.
little bit. But I think it was destined for that guitar to be in Tony's hands.
Yeah. I mean, there is the famous story about the ovation that he played on part of Manzanita, which I guess is a true story. It's been confirmed, right, by Sam Bush that he played. And
Yep.
it just sounds, you know, amazing. Not like an
Yeah.
ovation that you were, well, maybe, but you would play it, but the way I would play it wouldn't sound like that. But
Well,
yeah.
yeah, it was something about the sustain, if I remember correctly, that Tony wanted uh on that. And I don't remember what Sam had told me, but yeah. Yeah, Sam, we were standing in Oklahoma one day. I was still working with Rhonda, and we were going on right before Sam. And as we were, you know, basically coming off stage, we had kind of stopped and was talking with Sam a little bit. And anyway, right before Sam walked away from us to walk on stage, he said we were talking about Tony and talking about Manzanita and stuff, and he turned around to us and he said, "I don't care what anybody else tells you. I was there. Manzanita was recorded on an ovation." He's talking about the tune Manzanita. Now I don't know how much more of the other album was cut on it or not, but I do know that Sam says that I was there. I saw it. He cut Manzanita on an ovation.
Yeah.
I believe you, man. I'm not going
Well,
to
I
argue
mean,
with anybody
no,
about
no. I mean, it's always the player, right? I mean, my mom was a jazz pianist, and her hero was Teddy Wilson, who played with Benny Goodman, piano player. Great.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
grew up on that music. So when Teddy was older, he was playing little dive bars around. He was playing a little upright piano in some bar in some town in Connecticut, and we went to hear him. And the thing was probably out of tune, but as soon as he started playing it, it was like, whoa, that's Teddy Wilson. It just sounds like him. It doesn't matter what he's playing, it's going to sound like the player. And I think
Yep.
that's probably true of any, really great artist is that your sound comes out no matter what they put in your hands.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like the famous thing with Chet Atkins when somebody came up and said, "Man, that guitar sounds really good." And Chet hands it to him and says, "How's it sound now?"
That wasn't fair.
Yeah, totally not. But I think
Yeah.
that was his point. It's like
Yeah.
it's not the axe, man. It's the man swinging the axe.
Yeah. I just wanted to, I didn't intend to have this whole conversation be about Tony Rice, but I'm kind of glad it was. Because
Yeah, I love
obviously
Tony,
he's
man.
he's still very important to you and to me and to I've always thought I said this to Ricky Simpkins once. I said, Ricky, I think from aside from Bill Monroe, Tony Rice is probably the most influential musician in bluegrass history. And he said, you're right, he is. And I just don't think I don't know, he's a legend and he's a great this and that, but I don't think people really appreciate still how important he was to, I mean, every bluegrass musician in the last 30 years owes everything to the way he plays and the song selection, everything about it. I just, it seems like he never really got his due, even though he got a lot of due. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
Am I right or am I just?
I know. I totally agree. He's arguably the most uh, influential guitar player in bluegrass history, maybe in all history. I don't know, but definitely in bluegrass. And he, you know, I he just was the coolest guy. On top of that, and I loved him. He was my friend. On top of everything else, he was my hero. The two biggest influential men in my life were both Tonys, my dad and Tony Rice. And Crow was up there too because Crow believed in me, and so did Tony. When a lot of other people didn't, there was times when Crow, when I was younger, when I say younger, I was working with Rhonda the first time, and there was several times when I would play guitar and sing lead for Crow, filling in for Ricky, or I think one time was for Robert Hale, and then the other times were for Ricky Wasson. And uh, there's, I mean, the fact that they had the confidence in me to be able to do that, and then, for Tony to know, uh, my guitar playing and stuff, and he only heard me play mandolin on one song ever before he asked me to come play mandolin with him.
Hmm.
And it's like, that's putting a lot of faith in me. When you've only heard me play one song, that may have been the only song I knew. But it was when you get that kind of uh, uh, when you get that nudge, that good shot in the arm from one of your heroes, it really means a lot. And uh, I miss him, and I don't claim by any means to that I'm ever going to be anything like Tony Rice. There's a lot of things that I've posted over the years where people were like, well, Tony played that better. Well, no shit. I mean, obviously that's the point is, I'm not trying to be Tony Rice. I will never be Tony Rice, no matter what I do. I can only be Josh Williams, but Josh Williams has a huge and heavy Tony Rice influence. And if I can't play something the right way that Tony played, I won't play it. That's the kind of respect that I have for Tony. I'll either do it to the best of its ability to where it is exactly the way that he played it, or as close as I can get to it, or I'll approach it in a completely different way, because there's a certain way, you're not going to out Tony Rice, and it's never going to be done. But the way that I play, especially on Tony's material, is out of respect and homage or whatever, to Tony. And I want that legacy to stay alive through my playing. That's very
Yeah.
important to me.
Do you have a favorite of all the songs that he? Because I do have a favorite of all the songs, but I was wondering, do you have a favorite one song that you just, or is that impossible to say?
It's hard to say. If I had to, it would be probably Church Street Blues, just simply because that was the first song that I ever saw Tony play on that video that I told you about
Mm.
that my friend had. And that was a life-changing moment, and that'll always have a special place in my heart. But, if I'm listening to, Tony Rice, a lot of the time I either go to Me and My Guitar, or I go to Native American, because I feel like some of those are some of his best stuff, because he wasn't necessarily trying to make a bluegrass record. Don't get me wrong. The Bluegrass Album Band stuff and plays and sings bluegrass. Every record he ever did was great. But on the stuff where he was not trying to set a certain mold, he was just being Tony Rice. I think that's my favorite stuff. And hearing the way that like Jerry Douglas played on Night Flyer, hearing the two of them play off of each other, you know, just like the way Jerry takes the song out, with the way that he plays with the timing and all that kind of stuff. And just it's just that stuff to me uh encapsulates Tony Rice, the essence of Tony Rice, which was not just a bluegrass guitar player.
Yeah. Yeah, that song in particular, the way they kind of you can tell they're listening to each other, and they kind of that whole rhythmic thing that one of them does, the other one kind of copies, like that, syncopation thing. It's funny because I like some of his more mellow stuff, like I listen to Another Lonesome Morning or Darcy Farrow. My favorite
Mhm.
song of his is Song for a Winter's Night, the Gordon Lightfoot song. I think that's the most beautiful song I've ever heard in my life. I actually usually start crying when I hear it now. Just the way Gordon Lightfoot wrote a beautiful song, but Tony owned it. And it's just so pretty and emotional. That's what I
Mhm.
love about it. Just it's the
You know,
emotion.
that song, I know it's literally just talking about, a night where, it starts off with the lamp burning low, and then you know, the morning light sweeps across my window pane as the song's ending, but at the same time, it's almost like the first time I heard that one after Tony passed away, that hit me because it was like the sun had, the darkness had fallen, but the sun came up, and just all of that, the way, and just the emotion behind it when he was singing, if I could only have you near and breathe a sigh or two, uh, and then how it changes, you know, to be once again with you instead of on this winter night with you, and
Hmm. Yeah.
and I do, I feel that emotion in that, and like I say, it was almost foretelling, whenever when he passed away, and then hearing some of that stuff, I still get emotional on some of it, you know.
Mhm.
I still get emotional talking about some of the times with him, I remember one time we played in Danville, Virginia. Tony was born in Danville, Virginia,
Mhm.
and in his entire musical career, he'd never played in Danville, Virginia.
Mhm.
And we played there, and that was right after Harley Allen had passed away, and he and Harley were big buddies. Especially back when Tony was still drinking and stuff. They were big party buddies. And uh, when when Harley had died, I think that made Tony feel mortal. I think he felt more of his mortality then than he had before. And I know when he lost Larry, I know that was the same type of scenario, but I think in his mind, we were trying to figure out what was going on, and I found out later on that uh, when we got done with the show, Tony had been having in the last couple of weeks, he'd been having some chest pains and hadn't told anybody except for Pam in India. And anyway, I think when he found out about Harley passing away, I think he had a little bit of a moment where he thought he had come full circle, and was his last show would be at the same place where his life had begun.
Wow.
And we had finished the show, and he just stood there and was really looking at the people, and it wasn't the normal take a bow and thank you and walk off stage. It was, we walked off and he stayed on there, and we couldn't figure out why. And come to find out, that was why he was really worried at that point that might be his last time on stage. And he wanted to relish every last minute of that time that he could. And thankfully, that wasn't the case. We still had, many more shows after that. But,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
but Tony was he was a remarkable man, flawed like we all are, but a remarkable man. And, yeah, just gonna miss him. Still,
Yeah.
I do miss him every day. But
Yeah.
I wouldn't be who I am today without that.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, like I say, I didn't really intend to go full on Tony Rice, but I'm glad we did.
Yeah.
It's important to talk about people that are heroes and that aren't here, and that it's good to get emotional, I think.
Yeah, man.
About stuff,
Well, I'll come back on sometime and we'll talk about other stuff.
Yeah, okay. We talk about guitar playing and your band and blah blah blah, all that stuff.
Yeah, all that,
we didn't
man.
get to. Okay, we'll do it. All right.
Yeah, all that.
Okay. Well, I hope you sleep well tonight. You probably have some dreams about Tony.
Man, those would be great.
That would be great. And thank you very much for coming on. And we'll talk again. I would love to do that.
Yeah,
But,
absolutely.
Appreciate you coming on, and I'll send you the link to the conversation here if you want to listen to it. I don't know if you do, but
Yeah,
I'll send it to you. Okay.
Cool, man. Sounds great.
Right. Well, thanks, Josh. Take care, man.
Thank you. You
Talk
too,
soon.
Chris.
Bye.
Thank you, brother. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed our podcast, and thanks for listening. Visit our website, guitartownct.com, for concert and podcast schedules, or just to send us a message. We'd love to hear from you.